Hi, my name is Tormoehlen, and I'm the Ag Agent here in Scott County for UT TSU Extension. Today we're going to talk a little bit about soil tests. So first off, what is a soil test and why is it important? A soil test is when you send in some soil from where you're growing into a lab to determine what kind of nutrients and pH the soil has. And this is important because you can use those to determine whether you have issues such as deficiencies or the wrong pH, so then you can amend those early on and prevent headaches in the future. So some things to think about when you're taking a soil test. And so really you want to think about when and where you're planning to grow. And so as for the when, you want to do it when you can amend the soil, so not having plants in the ground would be important to think about. Generally we think fall or spring. And we think of fall because some of these amendments that we do to the soil takes time, such as changing pH. So it's important to think ahead. But getting an idea to add some fertilizers in spring works out as well. And then as for how many to take, it really depends on where you're growing. If you're just in a small homeowner's vegetable garden, then one's probably plenty. But if you're looking at an area with large differences in the growing area, maybe over a pasture with highland lowlands, or you don't know the previous history, or you do, like maybe it was conversion of fence rows into growing area or a previous home site. And so those are great examples of when taking multiple tests would be important, so you can look at how to fertilize different areas so then they are best suiting their needs. So what kind of tools do you need to take a soil test? And so that's one where there are several different options. You can go ahead and use what's called a soil probe, which I'll put a picture up on the screen. And this is a way that you can take quick and uniform samples throughout a growing area. But you don't need to use that. You could use things that you probably already have on hand, such as a garden shovel, a garden trowel. Then also you'll want to have a plastic container like a bucket to put your samples into, and then eventually your soil box, which you can get from our local extension office. So how do you take a soil test? And so that's one where you're going to look over your plot where you're growing and take 10 random samples throughout. And I say random because you want to have a good representation of where you're growing. You don't want to oversample from any one area of it. And so when you're taking these 10 samples, and you can do it randomly just by kind of walking zigzag, take a sample, walk a few feet one direction, switch, turn another direction. So when you take these samples, you want to go down about 6 to 8 inches into the soil. And you do that because that's where the root zone is for your plants. And the root zone is where they get a lot of their nutrients from. So when you sample that, you're going to get the best representation of how your soil is doing and any amendments that you need to do. Alright, now we're going to go ahead and take a soil test with a garden shovel. And so all you're going to do is you want to cut in at an angle from both sides. So then you can take this and put it aside, and then you're going to be taking a shaving. Doesn't need to be very thick, and then just make sure you go down deep enough. So now you have this cross section right here, and so since we're going to be taking 10 different samples and only need to have a cup and a half, you don't need this whole bit. So go ahead and you can just use a knife or hand shovel, anything, to kind of just take out about an inch worth from the middle. Alright, and that's where you can go ahead and have this and then put it into your bucket, and this is your first sample. And so then go ahead and you can repeat that 10 times throughout your plot. And then afterwards, you're going to want to go through and look for foreign materials, just like this organic material, the plants we don't need in this, we don't want it. So go ahead and take those out. And then also if there's any rocks, sticks, anything else, we just want soil in here. So once you go ahead and as you work through all the foreign materials and removing them, you can also take these clumps and break them apart. So then you have a nice uniform size throughout it, and then you also will want to mix up all your samples. So then you're not, when you take that cup of soil, only taken from one area, but you have a nice mixture throughout all 10 of your samples. So go ahead and do that, and then once you have it mixed up and have things removed, then you're going to want to let it dry, because we've been getting a fair amount of rain recently, and you can see that this soil is still wet, and you don't want to send that in. That's going to affect your final results, might give you false information, and then also it's going to cost more because shipping wet soil is heavier than dry soil. So that's where you can go ahead, and you don't want to put it in oven or anything like that. Don't do that. Instead, take a piece of cardboard or a paper plate and put your soil out on that, and then you can let it dry for a day or two, just out in the open air. Make sure to keep it away from kids or pets or anything like that. But then once it's dry, that's where you can go ahead and take, after you mix through, take about a cup to cup and a half and put that in your soil box right here. And like I said, you can get this from the local extension office, and you'll just want to fill out the information on the side, which is just some of your contact information, name, address, so then if it's at the lab, it doesn't get lost. And then we'll go ahead and next look at the submission sheet, which you're going to include as you send it in, or bring into the extension office if we're sending it in for you.
And so then the last step is filling out the soil submission sheet. And so this sheet just gives some basic information to the lab so then they can tailor their recommendations to your specific situation. So in the top left, you can see that there's an area to fill out for contact information. And this is just one to give some information so then they can return the results to you, either by mail or email. Moving on down from that, you can see that there's a table. On the left column is the sample name. This is just the name that you give the sample, and it's especially important if you send in multiple samples, so you can figure out which one's which. Moving on to the right of that, the columns for planting options. This is where you tell the lab what you plan on growing. And instead of having to write out every single plant, they have crop codes, which you can see at the bottom of the sheet and then also on the back of the sheet. And this encompasses everything from general vegetable gardens, ornamental plants, fruits and vegetables, a lot of different stuff you can cover. And so you have space for up to 4 different planting options. And so that's one where if you want to have a vegetable garden but also grow some ornamentals, or maybe have a strawberry patch, you can put that all there, so then you have recommendations that are specific for each kind of plant. And then just the one little word of warning. On the back sheet with the berries and fruits, you'll see that there's both a commercial and homeowner code. Make sure to put the homeowner code if you're doing just a small garden, because otherwise they will have it in per acre recommendations, which then you'll have to go back and do some conversions to get it to your scale. Then the last step here is figuring out which soil tests you plan on doing. And so for most people, it's the nutrient test. That's the one you want to do. It'll be $15 and tell you what the pH of your soil is and what kind of nutrients you have, and then recommendations on how to amend those if needed. And so that's one where in the end the soil test will be about $15 if you send in yourself, which you'll go ahead and package it up, have it in your soil box, make sure you close it up, then put it into generally a small box if you can. That's better, so then it doesn't get smushed, and then send it to the address located here on the sheet. And if you send in yourself, you can either pay by check or online at soillab.tennessee.edu. The other option is you can take this your soil sample into the extension office here in Scott County, pay $19, and we'll send it in for you. and so the $19 is just the $4 to cover shipping costs. And so yeah, otherwise, um, they'll go ahead and return the results back to you as soon as possible, and then you'll have a sheet talking about what your soil looks like and any recommendations that you need to make. If you have any questions on how to do this, how to read your results once you get them back, or anything else, feel free to call the extension office and we'll make sure to get an answer for you. Thanks and have a good day.